Hello, welcome to this, another of the Richardson lectures on river landscapes in the UK. This time we'll be looking at river landforms along the River Tees, using the River Tees as an example to illustrate how features change downstream. So we need to be able to describe the course of the River Tees and to identify and describe the landforms we find along its course. So here's a good overview map showing the full course of the River Tees. The River Tees is a river in the northeast of England. Its source up here at Crossfell up in the Pennines. The river then flows east, passing through Darlington and Middlesbrough before it reaches the North Sea where its mouth is. And this map nicely shows the different stages of the river's course, the upper, middle and lower course, by identifying these areas by height above sea level, using these different greys here to show the different stages. So, as we said, the source of the River Tees is up here at Crossfell. Now at this point, lots of streams are flowing off this boggy moorland. The moorlands in the Pennines are particularly boggy, peaty, they hold a lot of water, and what we see is small streams flowing off that moorland, which eventually come together to form a larger river. And at this stage the streams have very little erosive power. But it doesn't take long before those streams start to come together to form what is the River Tees. But at this stage the river is rather narrow, the bed load large and angular. There's not been much time for erosion yet, so if you were to take a sample of bed load here, it would be very large and angular. It hasn't had the chance to erode through processes of abrasion and attrition to get it any smaller. We'll then move on, still in our upper course, to our first major feature, and that's high force. Now high force, as you can see from the images, is a textbook, a classic waterfall that we find on the River Tees, and it clearly shows two different rock types. We'll put a boundary on there to make it even clearer, but we can see at the top here we've got a harder rock. This is a volcanic rock called the Wind Sill that moves through, is found in much of north of England, and underneath that we've got the softer limestone. And through the processes of hydraulic action, abrasion, wearing away at the soft rock, we've created this drop in the river's profile, which eventually is moving back, retreating upstream, creating this gorge in the foreground. Now we're going to jump on now to the lower course. This is where we see the best examples of meanders, and these are near Darlington. So I've got a satellite image here. I'll just highlight the map to make it the river to make it a bit clearer. This isn't in the lower course. The river now has much more energy eroding laterally, which is what creates these large bends in the river. And at this stage, with such big meanders, it's also easy to see where we're likely to find oxbow lakes forming in the future. So we've got narrow necks like this. We can see that we may eventually get a breakthrough here, create a new straighter course, and abandoning one of the old loops to form an oxbow lake. Another good example of a meander can be found surrounding actually the town of Yarm. The meander bends are flowing around the full town here, and at this point in the river though, the bed load now is much finer, it's smaller, it's subject to much more erosion, and so it's changed considerably since we saw it in the upper course. And lastly, we find an estuary where the river meets the sea as it flows out into the North Sea, just north of Middlesbrough. We can see from this aerial view that the river by this point is much wider than it has been earlier, and it's depositing a lot of fine mud in and around this estuary. And this estuary is actually a very industrial place. The size of the river, the shape of the river and the landscape around it has allowed heavy industry to develop along the river's banks. So we haven't actually seen any examples of exam questions yet that refer specifically to a named example of a river. It is on the specification though, and so it's possible we could get some questions like this in the future. So here's one example, quite wordy. It says, to what extent does an example of a river you have studied illustrate the features normally associated with a river's course from its source to its mouth? So it's wanting us to know, using an example, does that example show the landforms we would usually expect to find along a river's course? So we need to obviously refer to our specific river, and ours is the Tees. We then need to have some clear description of the different features at different stages of the river's course. So for example, we can say in the lower course there are large bends in the river, we know as meanders, and those are found near Darlington. So referring to specific places and characteristics. Of course, it is a to what extent question, so we do need to answer that. And we can finish really off by saying that the river tees does largely show those features expected and where we'd expect to find them. One thing we don't really see much of on the river tees is many meanders in the middle course, which meanders are a middle course feature, but they're not as present on the river tees. So that sort of helps us out with our to what extent. And just another example here, much simpler use of this example. It says, with reference to an example from a UK river you have studied, explain the formation of a waterfall. So it's a classic explain the waterfall formation question, but wants you to also refer to a specific example. So you need to do that usual explanation with clear reference to the specific processes, in this case hydraulic action and abrasion, but you must also include a specific example. And our example, of course, is high force on the river Tees. Start your answer with that. You could also refer to the specific geology here as well to show further knowledge of this specific waterfall. Okay, that's it for this video. Next time we'll be looking at the causes of river flooding.